Good morning, everyone. My name is Natasha Shilubane, and I will be your virtual host for today's amazing lineup of talks. The African Bird Fair took a virtual platform in 2020 as a response to the pandemic and the national lockdown. While the intention was never to entirely replace the in-person experience, the virtual platform has been a major success, connecting thousands of people across Africa and the world. In this first session, we are hosting Graham Wallington, the CEO of WildEarth. WildEarth has been connecting people with nature virtually through live safaris, and they absolutely exploded during lockdown as people were locked indoors. We are grateful to WildEarth for partnering with BirdLife South Africa for the African Bird Fair this year, and to Graham for his upcoming presentation on remote connections to nature.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to this session on connecting remotely to nature. I'm Andrew de Block, the Agri-Tourism Project Manager here at BirdLife South Africa, and I'm joined by the CEO and co-founder of WildEarth, Graham Wallington. Graham developed a passion for nature during his first career as a scuba diving instructor, and in 1998 he co-founded Africam.com, which grew to be one of the biggest African websites in the early 2000s. Since then, he's been wholly focused on sharing nature with humanity, and he's deeply inspired by the internet and opportunities it provides for making the world a better place for all of its inhabitants. Graham is a visionary broadcaster, pioneering a new medium of live, immersive nature experiences through WildEarth, bringing millions of people all around the world into the African bush. At this year's African Bird Fair, WildEarth have partners with us to bring the virtual experience, and you can view their stream on our WildEarth channel. Their virtual connection to nature has gone absolutely viral, especially during the pandemic when people were restricted from the outdoors and travel. And Graham's with us here today to tell us a little bit about that secret formula of how humans can satisfy that innate and inherent need to connect with the natural world while in front of a screen. So thank you, Graham, for your time and for partnering with us at this year's African Bird Fair. I'm very excited about that. And I'm equally excited to chat to you today about connecting remotely to nature and the absolute incredible success that has been WildEarth.
Thank you very much for having me. It is a true privilege to be here talking to you, and also a really great privilege to partner with BirdLife and with your Bird Fair. It's an exciting project and one that we're really proud to be a part of. So I'm sure it's going to be a huge success. And obviously I'm talking about my favorite subject, which is connecting people to nature. And what I'll do is I'll just jump straight in, and I guess right off the bat with you know, people look at WildEarth, they watch our channel. Many of your viewers and followers will be in South Africa. They'll probably know us from DSTV, but WildEarth is available on about 60 different platforms, including DSTV, all around the world. We reach about 5 million people per month, and most people don't quite appreciate really what it is we're doing. So it's really great that I've got this opportunity to explain it. Basically, we're not your normal wildlife TV channel. We're really quite different, and our whole objective is really quite different. In fact, WildEarth's mission specifically is to increase the value of nature to people. Now, it sounds quite simple, and we spent the last sort of 15 years really figuring out what does that mean. You know, we don't see ourselves as a conservation company. We don't see ourselves as a news or a documentary maker that might be trying to create awareness for the various different challenges that conservation faces. There are great organizations, National Geographic, BBC, Discovery, many others that are really good at doing that. And we really see our role as a very specific one. And that is to give people the opportunity to feel like they are in nature. So it's a really specific objective. And we've dedicated ourselves to figuring out how it is that we can scale that experience of taking a walk in the forest without scaling the impact that we have when we do go and spend time in nature. So sort of in English, if you will, is that in the physical world, you can get about 8 people onto a game drive vehicle, and you're going to have 4 tires pressing down on the ground. And if you'll imagine that it's those 8 people on the vehicle that are experiencing the ecosystem services of nature, and the 4 tires on the ground are the impact and the negative impact that is happening to the environment. And so it's the trade-off, is the ecosystem, the services, the experience that people are having versus those 4 tires. And what WildEarth is all about doing is trying to make it so that millions of people can feel like they're on that vehicle and still only have 4 tires pressing down on the ground. And it rolls off the tongue to simply say, well, we'll put a camera on the vehicle and boom, everyone will feel like they're there. And in reality, it's not that simple. I mean, that's obviously the beginning, but it's quite a lot more complex than that. And there are really a variety of different psychological cues that we use to achieve that. But before I get into those, I think it bears talking about, to just talk about what is this ecosystem service of just being in nature. And I think we all innately know what that means. I've just gone for a walk around in the park, and it's relaxing. It's you know, you don't have to see a herd of elephant, you know, or some rare bird in order for you to experience what it's like and to get the benefits of just being surrounded by nature. And the Japanese really put it well. They have a word called Shinrin Yoku, which directly translated from the Japanese means the art of forest bathing. And what it really is saying is that we all know that being in nature is good and makes you feel good. But in actual fact, there's an art to being in nature. And in order to get that ecosystem service, to get the maximum, if you will, ecosystem service, what you need to do is you need to go into nature without a purpose, without a destination, without the objective of, you know, seeing the big 5. And although I know I'm talking to Twitchers here, so the whole concept of not going out with a purpose is probably an alien thought. But the reality is that why this works is that if you go into nature and you allow yourself to be distracted by whatever you see, what happens is you suddenly become present. You're not thinking about yesterday. You're not thinking about tomorrow. You're just distracted by whatever it is that you're seeing. And that's the moment at which the magic happens. Because what's happening in that moment is that it's your own brain which suddenly just becomes present. All that's happening is you're meditating, actually. The actual word is you're meditating. And it's hard to meditate because we're constantly distracted by everything from our mobile phones to, you know, the myriad of problems modern society throws at us as adults. But there's something about nature where you can suddenly, it makes it easy to just escape your world and just focus on that butterfly, focus on that tree, or even just a beautiful scene in front of you, or any wild animal of any type. It makes it easier to become present. So the magic that we're after, our whole objective is basically to scale the ability, the art of being present in nature. And the way we do that is through these 4 psychological cues. And the first one, which is really the most obvious and maybe the most important, is that we broadcast live. And the mere fact that you're broadcasting live allows for something to occur called telepresence. And telepresence, it's what we're experiencing right now. We're in two different geographical locations, but for this moment, what's happened is we've created a third one, which is where at the same moment, you and I are in a third ill-defined remote location where we've projected our consciousnesses into this, and that is telepresence. Interestingly, as an aside, is that in the I think it was in the 60s, that the inventor of the satellite, the communication satellite, which was the famous science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke, was at a AT&T, I think at that stage it was still called Bell Labs, conference. And this was before the invention of the internet. He was talking about what the future might hold. I mean, he spent his whole life, kind of predicting and creating the future. And he was talking about what he thought that these communication satellites that had just been invented could actually be used for. And interestingly, his example was something called a Tele Safari, which is where he created this. He said, one day in the future, there'll be a guide standing on the side of the Amazon River, and people all around the world will feel like they're right there. And they'll be able to ask that guide questions and they'll get answers in real time and they'll feel like they're right there. So interestingly, the inventor of the satellite, before the invention of the internet, saw one of the real applications of this live telepresence as being telesafaris. So that's the first one. The second one, also Arthur C. Clarke mentioned, which is the interactivity, which is really where we allow our audience to send their questions in, and we'll answer some of those questions. We can't answer them all, but we'll answer some of those questions in real time. And the guide, the naturalist, will turn around to the audience and say, John in New York wants to know why zebras have got stripes. And in that moment, John in New York really connects. I mean, obviously, he's super connected. He's been spoken to directly by a guide in Africa in the wild with a zebra in the background. It's for him, it's an amazing connection. But even beneath that is another important factor, is that all the other viewers recognize, hey, I'm not watching this alone. I'm part of a community. There are people all around the world right now that are experiencing this exact same zebra sighting with me right now. And that's important. That community, we're a gregarious animal. We definitely need that connection, and that feeling that I'm sharing this experience helps to enhance that feeling of being remotely present, along with a whole lot of other people. The third cue is also in two layers. The sort of the surface layer is that we shoot everything in what's called a point of view style, a POV style. This means that we're positioning the camera at the back of the vehicle in the same position that you'd be sitting if you were a guest, or if you're on a bushwalk, we're following, the camera's following the naturalist along, just like at the eye level of a guest. Or if we're free diving in the kelp forest in Cape Town, we're following the other free diver down into the kelp. So we shoot everything in this POV style, which helps the viewer to feel that the window, the television screen, is a window into a world, and it represents their point of view. But in order to make that work, there's a sort of a hidden layer beneath that, which is actually really at the heart of what makes WildEarth all about making people feel present. And that is, it's a simple concept, and that is that we only have one camera per location. Now, this simple fact is important because from a very young age, we're all taught that when we see cuts between cameras, we're watching TV. But if there's no cuts between the camera views, then we're actually we're on Skype or Zoom, or we're having a video call. and it's real, it's live, it's authentic. And the minute we start seeing cuts, what happens is it pushes the viewer into being a spectator of an event that was recorded, rather than being them actually having that point of view experience. So counterintuitively, where all other television producers are always looking to push up their budget, push up the production values, put in another camera, put in a drone, put some graphics in, we're doing the opposite. We're stripping away as much as we can until we're just left with what's necessary for that viewer to feel present in nature. And then the final psychological cue is that we do this ritualistically. Now, what ritual is such an important thing. It basically means that we do this every single day, rain or shine, no exceptions, Christmas Day, 365 days a year. We never cancel, we never delay, we do it. And why that's so important is because the viewers then come to rely upon it. And you know, the way the brain works is that every night, most of us, almost all of us, try to, or hopefully do, get to sleep. and in order to do that, we have to ritualistically prepare our brains to allow it to slip into sleep. We do things like, for example, lying on a bed. Actually, lying on a bed is not a requirement of going to sleep, but it's what we do to ritualistically prepare ourselves to do that. Some people might have a cup of tea or Horlicks. Some people might have a bath. Some people might put their pajamas on. Some people might watch some TV. Some might have a whiskey. Everybody's got a different ritual that they use to prepare themselves for sleep. And that ritual is critical for us to be able to remotely transmit our consciousness into nature. So those are the four psychological cues that we use to help the viewer allow themselves to slip into WildEarth and into nature. But there are also some other sort of less obvious things which are really important, and they're more about not breaking the experience. So for example, we only answer questions that are relevant to what's on the screen. And we try to get our naturalists to only talk about what's relevant on the screen. This is because if we all start talking about something else and then watching something different, we're splitting our consciousness. We're no longer present. We're actually trying to be present in two things, and that makes it harder for people. And there are various other little, I wouldn't call them tricks, I would call them processes that we use to help people to feel that presence. Now, the next thing that's really quite important is now that we've got the viewers feeling like they are there in nature with us, the next thing is to get them to empathize with the animals. And this is obviously very important, because if we want to increase the value of nature, we need to scale the ecosystem services, but we've also got to make people care about that nature. And obviously you can't, caring is another way of saying empathize. And empathy is something that we're uniquely capable of doing. Sympathy is what we feel when we see rhinos being poached. But empathy is where we care for individual animals. So a human being can't empathize without a narrative. So everything we learn, everything that we process about the world, we process through narrative. We are the storytelling ape, actually. Not rather than the aquatic ape, we're the storytelling ape. And so we need a narrative in order to be able to empathize. And a narrative requires character. So you can't have a narrative without character. And so what we do is we identify individual animals. We use names. It's important at this point, there's a lot of people, particularly in South Africa, that feel that it is wrong to name animals, name wild animals. Many people will incorrectly assume that that is anthropomorphism, which it's not. So if you look up the definition of anthropomorphism, it is the projection of human attributes into an animal, but the identification of an individual animal is not anthropomorphism. It is simply being able to identify one individual within a species from another one, which is critical not only for, excuse me, not only for not only for storytelling is identifying individuals critical, but it's also critical for science. So you know, it's not possible to do population dynamics without the capture-recapture model, for example. So I mean, ringing of birds is all about being able to identify individuals, so that we can see, you know, when we see that bird again, we can use that data to extrapolate more individual, you know, the information about the population dynamics. So the key thing is to identify the individual animal with a name, and then for the naturalist to provide information about that individual animal, without it being a lecture about the species. And the way we do that specifically is that we provide relevant information about the opportunities and challenges that that individual animal has within the context of what we're experiencing and watching now. And let me just explain that a little bit better, is that the minute a human being can identify an individual and does no longer see that leopard as a representative of the species, they're no longer ticking box of the big five. They're now seeing Tlalamba, the individual leopard. And if we provide information about the gestation period of Tlalamba, because she's pregnant, and we think she mated with Tingana a month ago, which means that we expect to see cubs in, you know, 8 weeks' time, this is relevant information to the viewers, which allows them to empathize. It allows them to say, okay, I'm going to remember that I've got cubs coming over here, and I'm going to remember that that's happening, and she's pregnant, and Tingana could be the daddy. Suddenly, people are focused on understanding the life of that individual animal. And that's the moment of empathy. And so WildEarth is really in two parts. One is to make people feel present in nature in order to scale the ecosystem services to increase the value of nature. And secondly, we're there to make people empathize with nature, because it's only if we care about the individual animals that we're going to have any chance of conserving their habitat and the environment as a whole. And that's the way we've approached this conservation challenge, that we're all coming at from various different angles to try to, you know, make our contribution. And that's narrowly what we see as our target. Just jumping on quickly to one other area that I thought I'd share, which is kind of topical and will be a big part of the bird fair and WildEarth while we're broadcasting at the bird fair with your various different ornithologists and naturalists around the country, is that recently we've launched a new show that starts after the end of our sunrise safari, and it runs up until Penguin Beach. So every afternoon we spend an hour on Penguin Beach, Stony Point National Park in the Western Cape, where we're spending time an hour every day with this colony of African penguins, which has become quite a thing for all of us. We've gotten to know a lot of the individuals. We're following the various different nesting behaviors and the interrelationships, and who knew it was so complicated with penguins. Actually, I think we all probably suspected it. But between the end of our sunrise safari and the beginning of our Penguin Beach, we've got this new show called Escape to Nature. And it's really trying to do exactly what it says on the tin, which is provide people an opportunity to just slow down during the day and escape into nature. What's quite interesting about it is that it's got three different elements. It's got three webcams controlled by a naturalist in our control room in Johannesburg. One webcam in Okukuyu in Etosha, one in Djuma in the Sabi Sands, one in Mashatu in Botswana. And then we've got a team currently down in Amakhala. We're calling them the roaming team. So instead of like many of our other teams that stick in one location for years and years and years, this team is going to we're building a circuit that's going to go around Southern Africa. They'll spend 6 to 8 weeks in each location. They're in Amakhala at the moment. They're going to go to Madikwe next. And then probably Kariga back in the Eastern Cape, and we're slowly expanding what different reserves we go to. They're not going to be following the same strategy that they will be on a game drive vehicle, but they won't be chasing sightings. You know, the normal game drive procedure is drive, find an animal sighting, spend a bit of time, then move on and find the next one, which is great. I mean, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. And we do that every morning and afternoon. But this team is a bit different. This team's mission is to really spend long periods of time, the whole day, with one sighting, or even at a waterhole or at a meerkat burrow. On Saturday, I really enjoyed. They spent the whole day. Lauren spent the whole day with one small herd of buffalo, and it was quite amusing because, you know, for the first hour or so, the buffalo behave like we know they behave. You know, they behave in the same way. And then I guess after about an hour, they figured, okay, these guys are just not going to leave. Everyone, you can take your masks off. And these buffalo just changed their behavior. I mean, there was a whole new interaction. It was like, okay, we'll ignore the humans, and they started playing around. I mean, you don't often see buffalo playing, and then they just sort of all ran off over the top of the hill. We followed them, and then they just stopped, no apparent reason. I mean, buffalo are an interesting animal, it turns out. And so the idea is to slow right down and just sort of practice the art of forest bathing, and allow ourselves to be distracted by something we weren't expecting. The other team is a photonaturalist team, and I think this is a really exciting one, and we're looking forward to partnering with BirdLife particularly on this. And really, this is where we've got it's a team, but it's one person. It's a photonaturalist. So it's a naturalist with a skill and experience and a love for photography. Right now, we've got Samantha at Kazuko, also in the Eastern Cape, and she's at a bird hide. And what she's doing is what we're doing as viewers is we're looking through her Canon mirrorless camera with a great lens, and we are watching while she takes photographs. And she's telling us about what's going on, and we're waiting for the birds. Obviously, we have to wait for the birds to come to us. We're not able to chase around after them, and what we're trying to solve here is an interesting thing, is that, you know, there's this disconnect between photographers and collectors of photographs. A photographer is capturing a moment that they experienced in nature, whereas a collector is making an interior decorating decision. They're picking a photograph for its size, its color, its shape, its composition, its subject, and how it's going to fit in their lounge. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to give our viewers the opportunity to be there at that moment that a great high-resolution, professionally taken photograph was captured, so we can give them the opportunity to then collect experiences that they've had in the hands of an expert photographer. So I know you and I have been meeting and talking about the possibility of working together in Wakkerstroom, and so this photonaturalist will be moving to other locations with a focus on birds. Not only, I mean, obviously at a hide anything can happen, but we really think it's an exciting way through long lenses to spend some time with our avian friends and get a closer look into bird life. And so yeah, we're excited about Escape to Nature, and then just to sort of talk about the next steps in 1 minute is that in early September we're going to be launching a new sunrise safari from India in Tadoba. It's called Tiger Live. It's going to run for 3 hours before our African sunrise safari. 3 teams on safari vehicles, jeeps, in Tadoba in Maharajasthan, and it's the same concept. So it's game drives, looking for tigers and peacocks, and we're super excited about that. And then later on this year, if all goes according to plan, we'll be doing a sunset safari from Brazil in the Pantanal and in Amazon to finally realize Arthur C. Clarke's vision. And here we're hoping to see, of course, jaguars, capybaras, anacondas, giant otters, but also the hyacinth macaw, harpy eagle, and some other incredibly exciting birds and wildlife that we obviously don't get here in Africa. So that's our story, and yeah, I mean it's something we're really passionate about and love doing.
All right. Well, sure. I'm sort of stuck for words. That was really fascinating. I was having a chat with Jenny Cruz Williams, who's one of South Africa's well-known media personalities, earlier today, because we're doing some bird fair preparation work, and telling her that I'm very excited to host you for a session. And she says, "Oh, you must thank Graham. WildEarth just kept her going through the pandemic, and she used to watch religiously every day, and she still watches whenever she can. And she loved those journeys with the individual animals, as you said. I think Jenny's story is common to so many, not only South Africans, but people all over the world who just needed to connect. And I think we all have this need as people and as human beings, and as you say, apes at the heart of it. We're gregarious and we need to connect with nature. It's just fascinating how you've so successfully brought people through the wonders of virtual technology and broadcasting, and you've not taken it to their screens. You've taken people and you put them in the bush, but that you remove them from one location, as you say, and you've taken them to another location, and then to broadcast it in a way that achieves that to the degree that WildEarth has, I think is just such an incredible feat. So it's so fascinating to hear what's gone on and all the thought, and as you said before, sort of even the neuroscience and psychology that goes into creating and crafting experiences that people can connect with. It's just incredible. And I think you were saying that you're speaking to crazy twitchers here, and we don't know how to go out without a cause of going out into nature without a purpose. But I think one of the things that I really enjoy about birding is that it can be enjoyed in different ways. So you can have that meditative birding where you just literally go out and you see what you see, and you spend half an hour. Actually, one of my favorite experiences is watching birds dust bathe.
Yeah.
And it can be house sparrows, it can be spur fowl, guinea fowl, love it as well. And it's just fascinating to sit there and watch them go through their routines, and how they they have then preferential dust bath spots which they fight over, and then you have they get chased around. Those kind of experiences where you, as you said, just let yourself get distracted by whatever's in front of you, can be just as powerful as going out and being like, well, I want to see a harpy eagle today. And when you see the eagle, it's an incredible sense of achievement and relief and all of that. But there's different ways to enjoy birds, and I think it's something you've brought into your programming now with Escape to Nature. And I'm really keen to see where this partnership can go between WildEarth and BirdLife with regards to that, and a number of other ideas that we're working on. And just to remind people that we have partnered for the Bird Fair, so do go and catch the WildEarth broadcast. It is being broadcast straight to the Bird Fair, so you don't need DSTV in South Africa or any other channel. You can go watch it on our live feed. And we have, as Graham mentioned, some of our ornithologists and naturalists along on some of the vehicles, which is such a privilege for us to have people on those vehicles talking about birds and pointing out different things in the bush. So we've got David Letswalo and Paul Nkomane, who two of our famous community guides from Mahuba's Cliff, but they work all the way through Limpopo, and they're with the guys at Juma, and then Wesley Gush, who's familiar to many of our BirdLife South Africa supporters, because he's presented a couple of webinars for us, and he's just signed up to do his PhD with BirdLife South Africa on secretary birds. So he's a great representative to have down at Amakhala in the Eastern Cape. So wonderful that we could have that opportunity. So thank you for that, Graham. We're so excited to have you guys at the fair. Such a privilege. Thank you.
Oh no, the privilege is all ours, honestly, and thank you so much for arranging for those guys to join our teams. We're super excited about it, and I know our audience all over the world is as well. And I think that the thing to remember here is that, you know, WildEarth obviously broadcasts from some of these places with some super big, iconic, you know, African big animals, the big and hairies, and those are great, obviously, and people love to see those. But you know, for what happens to so many of our viewers around the world is that they get the opportunity to connect with WildEarth and the animals, and then they suddenly say, you know, wow, I've got wildlife right near me, and they go out there, and mostly what they see is birds, you know, and birds are the most ubiquitously, you know, covering wild animals around the world, and they're often the sort of almost the ambassadors, if you will, of nature. You know, most people can't access elephant. You know, we as South Africans, you know, we've got really a lot more access than most people around the world, but for 99.9% of the world, they'll never see an elephant in the wild, ever. But everyone will see a bird in the wild. And so those birds are really important as the emissaries of nature into the majority of humans' lives.
Absolutely. And I think something we picked up, and it's definitely been picked up around the world, is that with a horrible pandemic that we've just gone through, one of the silver linings is that there's this absolute booming interest in birds, because people had all these national lockdowns where you weren't allowed to travel, you were constricted to your four walls in your garden. And the way, if you weren't watching WildEarth, to connect with nature was to go outside and see what birds came to your garden. Our Facebook group absolutely exploded with new people saying, I've seen this bird in my garden, and they snapped a pic, and won't someone help me? And it's that spark, you know, it's not just birds, it grows from birds and becomes this overall awareness and then love and passion for nature, which is, I think, at the heart of, if we're going to save this planet, we all have to be there.
Well, I think that's what happened, is that, you know, at one of the worst moments in environmental history, we were suddenly given an opportunity where what we took for granted was taken away from us. And there's no better way to appreciate something than to have it taken away from you. And I think that's both what drove the interest in WildEarth and what drove the interest in birds. But really what it was suddenly, when you couldn't get out, you suddenly said, wow, that's what I really value, is the outdoors, is nature. And so maybe we needed it. Maybe we needed to be reminded just how valuable the thing we took for granted is.
Yeah. And the names for animals thing was really interesting for me personally. I mean, I actually came into this conversation with that attitude of, you know, well, I think we shouldn't give animals names because people then assume that they are, you know, cute and cuddly cats, as opposed to, you know, really finely tuned and evolved killing machines, and things that should be respected and seen in the right context. But what you were saying really made sense about connecting people with those animals, and then what that can do for greater interest and awareness and engagement from those viewers. And on a virtual platform in particular, I think that really cues in really well with how people are experiencing the whole broadcast. So I think, you know, you changed my opinion to some extent on those. And I was also reminded that BirdLife South Africa actually did a campaign quite a long time ago now, just after the famous treasure oil spill in South Africa in, I think it was 2007. There was a massive oil spill, and there were tens of thousands of African penguins that were oiled, and it was the biggest coordinated volunteer conservation effort in history.
I remember it.
Yeah, and they actually took some of these birds which had been oiled, and they couldn't put them back in the ocean because the conditions were still bad. There was still oil floating on the surface of the slick. And they said, okay, well, we're going to take some of these birds from Cape Town. We're going to drive them up to PE, because there's also colonies of PE where they weren't affected. And we're going to release them there. And maybe they stay in PE, but maybe they find their way back to Cape Town. And what BirdLife South Africa actually did was we put little tags on some of these penguins, and we could track their journey and how they came back to Cape Town. And what really grabbed the interest of the population was, or the South African population, was that we named each penguin. So you could see where Peter was on day 3 versus Peggy versus Patricia. I think they all had P names. But that's really, people got so invested in the individuals and what they were doing and how they were faring. And we haven't had data come through from Peter for a few days, and then he pops up and he's 100 k's west of where he was, and it makes headlines. And you know, people want to connect in that way. And I think, yeah, it is an ongoing debate, but I think you certainly swung me onto the other side of the spectrum. So well done.
Well, I'll tell you something else, which might swing you back the other way, but it's an interesting point, and that is that, you know, that the most successful conservation film ever made was not a conservation film, and would surprise people. And defined by being successful conservation film is that it got the most number of people to empathize with nature, was The Lion King. And The Lion King is one of them, you know, has no you know, it's factually inaccurate at almost every scene, but because the characters were so well developed, people were able to empathize with those characters. And as a result, developed such a positive feeling for all the characters, possibly with the exception of Scar. But so many people have said that, you know, before The Lion King, hyenas were evil, but Whoopi Goldberg changed everything with those hyenas. And it's simply this: it's because human beings can't empathize unless they can identify an individual character. It's that simple. They could never empathize with your penguins, you know, on that journey if they didn't have names, because they weren't individuals. And so we just got to accept, whether we like it or not, that if we want human beings to care, we're going to have to identify the individuals.
Yeah,
that's simple.
It's funny that you bring up The Lion King, because literally 2 weeks ago, I had an article published by Getaway on, like, bush lingo, I think was the title, on the most overused guide phrases in the safari industry, and half of them are from The Lion King. So I have a particular bugbear about that, but that's, I mean, it was a nice way to sort of round off the conversation. Maybe that was the movie that got me interested in nature, and took me the route of biology. You know, when I finished school, I had multiple options and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but biology became my favorite subject on the back of a childhood spent watching The Lion King over and over and over. I think that VHS was very, very worn out by the time I grew out of.
Well, there we go. That's my point.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my point right there, is that it had more impact on conservation than any other film made. Any documentary. I mean, I was a bit old for The Lion King to have that kind of effect. I was part of the Jacques Cousteau Attenborough, generation. But it's a powerful thing, and the lesson is a clear one, you know, is that we must realize that human beings will only conserve what they care about. They will only care about that which they empathize with. And I can't remember Jane Goodall's exact quote, but it was something in that vein. And therefore, at the end of the day, WildEarth's job is not to tell people about the challenges facing conservation, but to give them a reason to care.
I think that's beautiful. And I mean, BirdLife South Africa is a conservation organization. I think you are creating receptive audiences for us to go to and say, well, you know, you care about animals. This is what we need to do to fix the problem. So we're partnering in so many ways that we don't even realize. And it's been absolutely wonderful having you at the African Bird Fair, and I can't wait to work with you in the future.
Likewise, thank you very much. It's a privilege. Best of success with the fair. I'm sure it'll be a screaming success, and we look forward to years and years of collaboration.
Wonderful. Thank you, Graham.
Pleasure, mate.
Thank you so much to Graham for that enlightening presentation. Many people around the world are emerging from the pandemic and recognizing the importance of a human connection to nature after having been deprived of it. We hope that this is a positive sign for the future as we negotiate the climate emergency and biodiversity crisis. WildEarth has partnered with BirdLife South Africa for the fair this year, and they have a live feed of their programming streaming directly to our platform. So go get your fix of the bush by finding their slots on the agenda. Next up on Feeder 1 is our Ornithology Session with Siobhan Reynolds' Things with Wings Lab at Wits University. Make sure to have a look at our silent auction and exhibitors during the short break. Thank you once again to our various platinum, gold, and silver sponsors this year.